Hey, folks, welcome to the Cult Bar. So this week we're going to be talking about Unarius, and we're going to take it a little bit easy on you folks. We're dressed ridiculously like the folks from Unarius. Well, I am. Renee looks great. I look like a doofus. Yeah, it's going to be a fun thing to kind of take it a little bit easy. We've had some really heavy ones the first few, so we'll take one where nobody actually gets hurt. It's just a lot of ridiculousness. So yeah. So, how are you? What do you have in your glass? Because we have themed drinks. What's your themed drink?
We have like a double theme.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
So I'm drinking a Fox Mulder, which I accidentally dyed green. It's a long story. Don't worry about it. It's pineapple, lemon, whiskey, and chartreuse, and it's particularly relevant for the show, Doug, because as we're about to inform everybody watching, the X-Files is real. We're going to learn about that on the show today. So, what are you drinking, Doug?
So, yin to your yang there. I am doing an Agent Scully cocktail. So,
I don't believe that the X-Files is real because you're Scully.
Yeah. So, you and I are both huge fans of that show. And can you please do a brief synopsis of why X-Files is real before we get into the news?
Why it's real. Okay, so Unarius is a space cult, if that wasn't obvious, but also they don't believe that fiction exists. All fiction is real, and we'll get deeper in that later, but especially sci-fi, and it's really fun. Like the show, I mean, it's not going to be all fun and games, but it's mostly fun and games, literally. So, and you can leave knowing that whatever your favorite show or movie is, it's real.
It's real. It's all real. So before we get into Unarius and all their wackiness and fun, but weirdness, so why don't we talk a little bit about the cult news that is going about?
Right. So we'll do this a little bit differently. I want to do a trigger warning before we do the news because the news is going to be the triggeringest part. Religious control, spiritual abuse. There's going to be mention of financial abuse, sexual abuse. Hold on, because I got to look at my. Yeah, okay. I think I got them all. And then when we get into the actual cult, there's going to be way fewer triggers. There's going to be a couple moments where we discuss racism and a couple moments where we discuss ableism. That's about it. And the news, we're not going to go in detail. So if you really, really don't want to hear any of those things, come back in like 2 minutes, but we're not going into detail. So,
yep.
News. All right. I feel weird about smiling, but I guess that's what newscasters do, right? They smile through all the horrible stuff.
Hey, today 1,000 people died. Yeah. You're like, Jesus Christ, man. All right. Anyway, so, go ahead.
There's actually an article in Rolling Stone that I think is going out on our social media if you want to like actually read the whole article, because like I said, we're not going to go really deep in it. But it is the International Church of Christ, which I'm going to say I don't know if it's the same as the Church of Christ. I don't know if there's a difference. Just going to throw that out there. They are being sued. As laws have changed, there's now an extended statute of limitations on when adults can sue over child sexual abuse. And 5 women are suing what they're calling a cult, International Church of Christ, over lots of grooming, pedophilia, sex abuse. And then in addition to that, part of the claim goes back to a lot of the news that was going on back in the 80s even, where parents and members of the church were accusing the church of being a cult. There was financial abuse. Tithing was required. And if you didn't tithe appropriately, then your mentor, who basically is like your sponsor, but for the church, would literally go sit outside your house and pressure you into paying. There's some weird control over like your little person that keeps watch for you is more than an advisor. They really get to tell you whatever they want. And hopefully they're going to get the crap suit out of them. I think one of the people accused is actually dead. But they are suing the estate. So let's get them. And like I said, if you want to hear more, that's the Rolling Stone article. I don't want to go too deep in it because we're trying to give everybody a fun one this week. And this is not fun. But it is good news because hopefully justice will be done.
Yeah, and then that way they can kind of atone for their shit. And it's nice when you see that, most of the cults we've talked about and we will talk about there's a lot of shit that people get fucked over by, whether it be emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever. And to see them being held accountable is nice. That's a good thing to see.
Yeah, for real. And it's also good to see that the work done to change that statute of limitations is actually benefiting people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hopefully that does. So hopefully these folks get what they need to. Yeah, you can't. There's no real thing where it's like, oh, well, I'm compensated for what happened to me. There's nothing like that. If you're abused, there's no real compensation for it. Maybe you can make your life a little easier financially or something like that, but you still have to deal with PTSD and trauma and all that stuff. But maybe something that make your life easier in a different way can help. So hopefully these folks get that.
And that is discussed in the article. One of the women who's one of the plaintiffs discusses that, it didn't just ruin her childhood, but it's come into her adult life. And it's less about what she's going to get and more about knowing that there is some responsibility being taken, which.
Yeah, ramen to that. Yeah, so that was a little bit heavy. But before we get into the cult and all that stuff, we need to do a little bit of a sort of a primer on what this cult is, in that it's something called theosophy, which I had not heard of before this. So, Renee, you are much better at this than I am. So, can you give us a little bit of a primer on what theosophy is before we start talking about this nonsense?
Yeah. So, theosophy goes back a really, really long time, but in like around the time this cult was coming in to being, it was also Heaven's Gate, which I'm sure we'll cover at some point, but it's not nearly as fun as this one. And a lot of other of these cults that are into UFOs. And obviously when they started, it wasn't a UFO thing, but it's basically this idea that there's a group of entities somewhere on another plane, in outer space, wherever they may be, known as the Ascended Masters. And that your job as a Theosophian, maybe?
It's a little different than Rastafarian. It's a little different than that, but yeah.
But your job is to become good enough that these Ascended Masters will either come to you or take you away. And if you're really interested in the history of it, you can look up Madame Blavatsky.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with Theosophy, unfortunately, because it's the Ascended Masters and they're supposed to be like a different entity, like aliens or angels or something, it can get racist. People will say, actually, it's a master race and not a different species or whatever. In this particular case, they don't go the racist route. They go way wilder with it. And most cults that get into theosophy are actually not that entertaining because it's very they think it's very scientific, but it's not. Like, it's all made up stuff. But yeah, so this one's kind of fun because they're taking the idea of the Ascended Masters, the idea of making yourself good enough to be taken away on the spaceship or have them come to you, and just going wild with it. So yeah, if you Google Theosophy, if you Google Madame Blavatsky, lots of hard to pronounce words, you will get a primer on this because it'll come up again. There's so many, like if you hear the word theosophy, it's like 3 more steps and you're in cult territory, like almost guaranteed.
So, all right. So that's just kind of a basic view of what theosophy is. So just think UFO cult, and that you're on the right track there. So, or this, ascendant beings, that's actually, I think, is the bigger bit to that, right? So ascendant.
Yeah. So like,
what was the word you said? Not ascendant beings, ascendant.
The Ascendant Masters.
Masters.
In Unarius, they call them the Space Brothers.
Yeah.
Which
shows that brothers are not necessarily masters. So interesting that they chose that terminology, which, okay.
Sure.
So basically we start out with this fucking cockamamie idea. And so we're talking about Goddamn.
Yeah, we've got to our sources. We have two. We did something a little different. We have two sources this week. We did the documentary that just flashed on the screen, Children of the Stars, which you can watch for free on Tubi. But we also did an episode of Cult Podcast, which brings in some other sources and gets a lot more detail and is way more fun.
Yeah, way more fun and way less racist. So that's good. But yeah, this is the podcast. If Heaven was a Jimmy John by the Cult Podcast. They're really funny, and really they do a lot of background, and it really helped us. So like, I will say I got a little bit more out of the podcast than the quote unquote documentary, because the documentary was done from their point of view, which kind of left a lot of gaps for me. But yeah. So let's. So the beginning. All right. So the beginning is a long time ago.
So the founders of Unarius were born in 1900.
Yep.
So that'll give you an idea about how long ago this all started, way back when.
Yeah. So we have Ernest L. Norman and Ruth, who later became Norman because they got married.
Ruth,
but
I think.
Yeah, so Ruth was. We're going to talk a lot about her because later on she becomes kind of the focal point of all of it, in a great way. I'm going to tell you, it's going to be great. It's going to be great to talk about her. But she basically had this really kind of shitty upbringing. She was super poor. She had apparently like a very abusive first husband and maybe a second. Like, did you get like? It seemed like there's not a lot of data on that.
So here's what I'm going to say too: is like 99 times out of 100, when a cult leader is talking about their biography, they are exaggerating. But the only facts we have about Ruth Norman come from Ruth Norman. Mm-hmm. And some of them are literally like people who knew her don't know if she had a husband between her first husband and Ernest Norman.
Yeah.
It's like
maybe.
Yeah, perhaps. And if she did, he wasn't nice.
Mm-hmm. So let's get to this bit, because this just fucking fascinated me. This is like, are you kidding me? This seems so cliche, but it actually happened. As far as we know, because we're getting this account from Ruth Norman.
Right.
But Ernest L. Norman and Ruth, I'm not sure what her name was at that point, met at a psychic convention.
Yes. Well, and he's there because 3 invisible men follow him around and harass him about opening a library.
A library, which exists.
Yeah, but not a space library.
That's fair, but like we have libraries, and this guy's like, I want to open a library, and everybody would be like, yeah, we have those. What?
Well, no, because remember, like, this is the thing that I think is really interesting, is that supposedly this was going on for years. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, yeah, they're there and they're telling me to do it. And I'm going to do it. But like something's missing.
There's some piece to this cosmic puzzle that he doesn't have yet.
I'm not going to get space books.
Yeah. So at this fucking psychic convention, Ruth Norman, was it that she was, or did he get a reading first, or did she get a reading first? I think it was him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so they don't get into that much detail in the documentary, but in the podcast, I think they say he got the reading first, and they were like, "You have
a mission,
great mission," and he's like, "I do, because there's these 3 guys,
and I have a space library."
Right. And then she gets a reading, and they're like, "You also have a great mission." And my favorite part about this is like, if I went to a psychic and I got an identical reading to the person in front of me, I'd be like, "Oh, the psychic's full of shit."
Like, yeah, I'm going to go to a different psychic. I'm going to go over to this guy over here.
But they were like, "Oh, how amazing. We must have the same mission." And this was like, they were like 50 at the time that they met also. Like, this wasn't like, they weren't like young, starry-eyed, naive, gullible teenagers. They were 50 years old.
Yeah, a space library, Zach. It gets better. Just hold on, because it's going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then they decide together to go get another reading from a different site, but there's a
I mean,
different psychic, right?
why wouldn't you?
Why not? I bet it's like there's psychics abound. They're everywhere. So let's go get another one. So at this psychic reading, Ernest L. Norman gets told he is a reincarnation of Jesus, because why not? So
Who else would you be, really?
it is kind of fascinating that whenever a psychic tells you in a past life you're somebody, it's never like you were Joe, the fucking blacksmith for the village that did do shit. It's you're Jesus, or you're Attila the Hun, or you're like some massive figure. Like,
I want to know if anyone in the history of paid psychics has ever asked about their future and gotten like, you're going to have a very average and mediocre life. Not a lot is going to happen. You're going to maybe have a dog. Don't be sad, because like if nothing very exciting happens, also you won't have any rare diseases or suffer very much. Like it's going to be fine. You're just going to be mediocre.
You're going to have a milquetoast life. A
Right.
milquetoast life.
But it's like, well, you have a grand mission and also you're Jesus.
Yeah. Jesus, baby. And that is only one of the personalities that he has, or past lives, and we will get into that. But yeah. So they decide this means that they are fated, right? Has to be. These psychics are giving them these very clear signals just how perfect they are for each other. So
exact same reading, Doug.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how much more obvious could you get that they were fated? I mean, same reading, like just wow. So sorry, this shit just fucking kills me every time I think about it, just how ridiculous it is.
And it only gets more ridiculous from here, guys. So, like in the immortal words of Samuel L. Jackson, hold on to your butts.
Yeah, hold on to your butts. So they wind up getting married because, of course, they did. They were fated. They must.
Well,
how else do you carry out these missions if you are not together to do these missions together?
What if Jesus asks you to marry him?
Yeah, if he asked me to marry him, I probably would say no.
Fair.
I'm not going to get into that and piss people off, but just no, thank you.
I just realized I was describing nuns. So
yeah, all I can think of is the nuns from like the Holy Grail. Oh, this is so. Yeah, sorry. That shit. Whenever I hear stuff like that, all I can think of the nuns from the Holy Grail. So, all right. So now they're in California.
And this is my favorite part about this journey, is that they go somewhere and they like rent a house and they stay there for a while. And then they're like, this isn't it. This isn't the place.
Yeah. And we should mention this is the 50s. So people are super gullible.
Yeah. And what I think is really interesting is that this was the exact same time that the founders of Heaven's Gate were proselytizing in the exact same area, which is wild to think about. And they get into some stuff about that on the podcast. That's really hilarious. So we're not going to steal their jokes, but it is really interesting. Like, if you want to start a UFO cult in the 1950s and 60s, you go to Southern California. That's what you do.
Because you will have ample people to talk to that will believe you. So
apparently so, yeah.
Apparently. And I didn't really think there was a huge drug culture back then, but maybe I'm wrong, because it feels like there must have been, just to have all this amount of people who are like, yeah, man, let's fucking
just
do
high
it.
on the ocean air, right? Maybe there was still lead in the paint. There was still asbestos.
No, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Maybe that dumbed them down a little bit. So they basically become like kind of sort of a traveling circus, right? They just kind of go into these bebop around all these towns trying to find, what was the phrase they used? It was like, we need to find the right space where they're telling us this is the right space to be.
Right. That I don't know if at this point it's still the three dudes or if we've moved on.
The three dudes can't just abandon. This is the mission. They have to be there, right?
You're right. So the three dudes are going to tell them. But I want to know what takes them so long that they've got to like rent a house and everything.
All right, so that makes me question if it's three dudes and this Ernest dude and Ruth. Is it like a polyamorous situation?
Yes, because you mentioned both of them. So Ernest thinks he's like 10 different people, and when we get into Ruth's thing, she's got like 40. So there's a
Yeah,
lot going on all the time.
yeah. Sorry, I'm just still giggling about this idea. Oh, all right.
Me, my husband, and the three dudes that follow him around that you can't see, but believe me, they're there.
Yeah, just trust me. They're there. It's gonna be fine. And when we have sex, don't worry, they're not watching. Or maybe they are. Maybe you're into that. Let's do it.
Or they're like cats and they just sit on the end of the bed.
Or dogs just staring at you.
Also, they're called the Three Wise Men, which I love.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was the three wise men. They were wise men. Oh, of course they are. Because
'Cause
he's
he's
Jesus. He's
Right.
Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
This is the longest episode because we can't stop laughing, and we're not even at the funny parts yet.
No, we aren't even. This is just like the surface level shit. So they're going through all this California. So you're a Californian. I am not.
Yes.
So they end up settling in this place called El Cajon.
Yeah.
Outside of San. Can you explain what El Cajon is like? If you've ever been or know, because San Diego is like very, very. I don't know what it was back then, but now that is like you got to be rich to live there because it is fucking expensive.
So El Cajon is like, I mean, San Diego was expensive for the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So El Cajon is like where you would live if you worked in San Diego, but you couldn't afford to live there. Like, so I don't know if you've ever lived in a commuter town. I've lived in a couple.
I've always lived in commuter town, so yeah.
Yeah, so like these days, a commuter town is like grocery stores, Targets, and Starbucks, and like that's it. And so this was like the 1950s version of that, right? Like you could get your car fixed and you could get groceries, and that was about it.
And go to church. I'm sure there was churches around because it was the 50s.
Yeah,
there were churches everywhere now, but they were like way more then. But yeah, because it kind of seems funny to me that they settled in this kind of, I'm going to say like what feels like the California equivalent of a podunk town to set down roots.
Like, yeah, it is now for sure. It's just it is weird. I think maybe the Three Wise Men were budget savvy.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Hey, we had frankincense and myrrh, but we're a little low on that stuff. Can you go to somewhere where it's not quite as expensive?
Right. Like we can't do the beach on San Diego. There's infrastructure to think about, overhead costs.
Fair. I'm sure the Three Wise Men were concerned about overhead.
I mean, they're wise.
Are they though?
I mean, we don't know because I think they go. So very soon after this, they're running like a mail order book club, and Ernest croaks.
Yeah. Oh,
they go with
can we talk a bit about the idea that Ernest was a bit of a. So he had a lot of ideas. He was an engineer. So he knew some science stuff, but apparently, like he would try to talk the science up to people, and it was rather droll.
Yes.
So, and what I find super funny is that Ruth had to be an interpreter for what?
Yeah,
he spoke English. He spoke English. Why?
Yes, they called her a translator. It's like he's speaking English. She was just trying to like. Yes, I know he talked for 3 hours, but the part you need to know is that's what I think. She's like, have you ever seen a ska band play live?
Who?
There's a ska band when they play live, and there's like often one guy whose whole job is just to dance on the stage and hype people up. Mm-hmm. I feel like that was Ruth's job.
Oh, like a hype man.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Because even in a documentary, they did some shit where they showed a little bit of his speeches and ye gods, man, just like.
Okay, like I love books. You love books. That's how we met each other.
Yep.
Someone tells me if I'm gullible, someone tells me that they're going to open a library on Earth with all these books from space, I'm like, how could that be boring? But Ernest could make it boring. And I do love that when they started this, like she became Uriel and he became Raphael the moderator.
The moderator. Which,
like,
objectively, Raphael is a better name than Ernest.
Raphael is, but the moderator, like, that's the guy on the panel that just asks the questions and doesn't get to talk. Like, moderate is in the name. Like, he's just, I'm a boring guy, and even my cult fancy title is kind of boring. And when you see what Ruth becomes, it kind of makes you wonder if it weren't for the psychic telling them they were meant to be. I don't know that they ever would have thought that they were compatible.
Like, now, all right, so his speeches were vastly boring, and yet they were married. And I want you to imagine what the dirty talk would have been like in that relationship, because holy shit, hey, would you like to do this? It would have been so bad.
He's sitting there and like very slowly, monotonously describing the actual step-by-step physics of what is going to happen, and then she's got to come in and make it exciting.
And then she comes in, she's the hype man for the bedroom. I'm sorry, Lord, I apologize, because my brain is just like, what the fuck is going on with this couple? And they were not spring chickens, so who knows? Maybe I'm just making up dumb stuff, but.
Well, I mean, I feel like if you're in your 50s and you bother to get married, there's a reason. Back then.
Yeah, probably. So
they're probably like, look, we need to be taken seriously when we're trying to build the space library. And if we're living together and not married, then people will not take us seriously.
No. How are they going to ascend to the top level of the library if we are, putting up
the top level of the library? You know why?
Which we will get to. There's level to the library. We're getting to that.
But yeah, okay.
Apologies, folks. I am just giggling because this shit just fucking cracks me up. So
as we're getting to Ernest dying, I guess we should talk a little bit about Ruth's past.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't laugh during that part, but go ahead.
That's kind of funny. Look, okay. It's the opening to when this becomes fabulous.
This is when it gets really, this is where it really goes off the rails somewhere.
I feel like the sense you get from Ruth's version of her history is that she wanted to be great, right? So she says that she was a restaurateur and she was a very successful real estate agent, and she
great actress.
She was a great actress
by her own account.
Yes. And so old Ernie dies. And she is like, all right, now it's my time to fucking shine.
Yes, she does.
I mean, the cult gets a makeover. She gets a makeover. The Cadillac gets a make. It's like in full insanity all at once. She is no longer the secretary. She is literally a space goddess. Look at this.
Yep, look at this. That Cadillac is it right there.
Yes, and we'll get into this, but that UFO on top, they used to release doves during parades. Like this is
out of the UFO.
Out of the UFO. And then if you watch the documentary, there's a scene where the doves are coming out of the UFO, but Ruth is holding one and she like chucks it out the window to make sure it flies. That's very awkward.
Yeah, maybe that's what it's like when the doves cry, but I don't know.
Well, because the other thing is that when they first open it and they show the doves coming out, they're like, I guess maybe disoriented, because there's like two just kind of standing there, like looking kind of like, and then one pushes out, and then they start coming out.
They start moving. Yeah, just take one. It always just takes one.
Because they're like, oh, okay, good, we can get out of this like metal box in Southern California.
In the middle of California, at the top of this metal box, at the top of a metal car.
But so that's the energy she's bringing, though. It's doves flying out of a UFO that is mounted on an airbrushed Cadillac.
Yeah, and the idea you saw, like we saw that brief blue glimpse of her with one of her many audacious outfits with the planets, and it's a lot, but that's her. Like
Her.
she just went, I am going to be fabulous. Watch me, and I'm going to make you all be part of the ride. We're all going to have fun, and it's
So
like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this justice. I am not.
No, but it's kind of like it's very sudden, right? So when Ernest, aka Raphael, is alive, she is the secretary of Unarius and the translator. He dies and she takes over, which makes sense. Like they were doing it together. She takes over, and then it's like overnight, we're not building a library anymore. I mean, that's part of it. There will be a library.
Later, we're not building it. The Space Brothers will.
Space Brothers are going to come to El Cajon, or to a stretch of desert outside of El Cajon where property was probably affordable.
Probably, maybe.
These guys are going to come down in a spaceship, and like I don't even know. I don't want to give too much away because there's more coming. But it is this thing of just like she wakes up one day and it's like everything needs to be shiny and sparkly. I need to wear Christmas lights in my hair. I need full makeup. We got to get film students to join so that we can make movies. There's murals. Yeah. And everybody's going to get a new name. I don't know if that happened because Raphael was a new name. So maybe people were getting a new name before that.
I'm not sure that anybody else did. They just mentioned that her being Uriel and
yeah, because it seems like they weren't doing a lot in person when he was alive. So that's the other thing, right? Is they now have like a brick and mortar space where people can come together and do all this wild stuff. And she says that she is also Jesus. She is also he thought he was not Anubis. Osiris.
Osiris, which now we get into some problematic shit because Osiris was black, according to all the legends.
So that's the other thing about theosophy and a lot of like the ritual magic occult stuff, like the Golden Dawn and like all these really famous ones. If you're into any kind of occult stuff, you will recognize these names. Super fucking appropriative and almost always like shitting all over whatever the folk practices were, right? So it's like, and there's always Egyptian shit in there. I don't know why, because they are
always it, right?
But yeah. Oh, and he was also the reincarnated Chinese philosopher Kung Fu, which is so fucking racist. I cannot I don't think that he thought it was racist. I don't think that he was like making fun of Chinese philosophy, but wow. But she says she's all these things now. She has all of his past lives, and she has all these things plus other things of her own.
Yeah, and there's a lot of weird ones. A lot.
What's your favorite of hers?
I think it's interesting. It's ridiculous.
Same favorite, but
it's the idea that they both thought they were Mona Lisa.
Oh yeah, okay, that's my second favorite.
Yeah, because Mona Lisa wasn't real. That was just apparently like a self-portrait that they just made it into female. And the podcast mentioned that they were really ahead of the curve on just the whole gender identity thing. And they were just like, fuck it. Ernest was like, I was Mona Lisa. Like,
and Queen Elizabeth I.
And like gender didn't matter. We were just all these people. And if you think about the idea of like, if you're really going to go full bore on reincarnation, did the gender really fucking matter? No.
Exactly.
So like they were kind of really weirdly ahead of it. Then like the non-binary shit plays very well now, which is great.
Yeah.
But the there was just too many. I think he also thought he was Confucius.
think he thought he was Confucius. I think he thought Kung
It's
Fu.
what-
But Kung Fu is, if you put in what happened on the podcast, is one of the co-hosts immediately tried to Google that, and it was like, do you mean Confucius? Because Kung Fu is not a person, it's a form of martial art.
Yep.
But he thought he was one of the pharaohs as well. I can't remember which one. And she had several male. I think she said her body in this life was female, but her actual spirit was genderless.
Yes. Yes, that was the bit of it. I'm trying to see who he thought he was.
Really hard to Google. I tried.
Yeah, and it's just not. I mean, other than the fact that he wrote a boatload of books, apparently a first-hand account of the conquering of Mars.
Well, because that really happened, Doug.
Man, and that the Martian people live under the. They live under the crust. They don't actually live on top.
That's why you can't see them. Yeah, and well, here's the other thing, and I guess we'll get in. We might as well get into it because we talked about him believing that there was a Chinese philosopher named Kung Fu, and that he was the reincarnated version of this. There's some very strange benevolent racism where they believe that Martians came to Earth during this battle and that Chinese people are the result of Martians and humans mating. And I think in their belief system, they think that's like a huge compliment because the Martians are better than us. But like in practice, they're saying Chinese people aren't human, which is super bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like really, really bad.
Really, really bad.
Yeah.
Really, really bad.
And you kind of run into this a lot with them where it's like you can kind of tell that they don't understand that what they're saying is fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Um,
What was the he also thought he was one of the bird gods.
that was Osiris. Yeah.
That was Osiris, but and the podcast rode that the entire time, which was really funny. But it is interesting that like they also did a thing where they thought where they proclaimed to be members of, was it Romanian royalty? Was it Romanian?
Yeah, the Romanov family, right?
Yeah, but those people were alive at the time.
Yeah, but there's a couple of those, which I think is great because then, like, when because I'm feeling this outfit, so when I start my cult, I am gonna say that I'm Dolly Parton. They didn't have I feel like Ruth Norman would have said it if Dolly Parton was on the radar at the time. He didn't, so now I can. Also,
Can I
say I'm all hers because whatever.
Then can I say I'm like Willie Nelson? To be like,
sure, we'll go on tour.
The yin to your yang on that. How about that?
Yeah, we'll go on tour.
I need to be a lot older, a pothead, and have long hair, which I can't grow.
Yeah, no,
so,
because also I really am Fox Mulder and you really are Agent Scully.
What was that, Jillian?
I said, and you're not a pothead.
And I'm not a pothead. So, yes, you heard it here first. I am not a pothead.
It's part of the mission, Todd.
Yeah, hey, you know what? Maybe I have to start taking one for the team, but it's not something I enjoy.
Why don't my arms work?
Yeah, I am not good at ingesting weed. It is not something that works well on me. So
I like the way that you say that, like it's a skill people have.
It is, compared to me, it's a fucking skill because that shit makes me super fucking paranoid. So it's not my jam whatsoever. So.
Okay, well then maybe I'm Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson and you have to be someone else. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I don't want to be any other country person because I can't stand country music. So it is not.
Sure. It doesn't have to be country. Maybe you're Prince.
Well, Prince is dead. How about Keith Richards?
Oh, yeah.
Except I don't smoke, so maybe not him.
Well, but you're the reincarnation of him and this reincarnation doesn't smoke.
Well, here's the problem. If I'm reincarnating as him, I'm going to die at like 21 because that motherfucker is going to live like cockroaches. He's never going to die.
That's fair. That's fair. Oh, but you said your favorite, which is Mona Lisa. My favorite is that Ruth Norman claims to be the reincarnation of the literal Statue of Liberty, the actual statue, which still exists and is there and was there when she claimed this. And I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that could mean, but it's phenomenal to imagine.
Like, it's a fucking statue. It was not modeled after any one human being, as far as I know. And she thought she was the reincarnation of it.
Yeah, even if it was, she was not claiming to be the model. She was claiming to be the statue itself.
Okay, then I change my answer. I want to be the thinker. Because the thinker looks like he's sitting on a toilet. And just
your legs will go down.
enjoying the moment. So let me just reincarnate as that. That's what I'm claiming as a statue. If you had to claim a statue that you were, which statue would it be? And you can't pick the Statue of Liberty, obviously, because that is claimed. We can't claim that anymore. So,
well, what if I absorbed her light?
Oh, damn. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
So, first choice, Statue of Liberty, obviously.
Obviously. I mean,
second choice, the Victory at the Louvre, but when it still had a head.
Yeah, you don't want to reincarnate with a head.
Or Venus.
That's a bad look.
Oh no, I don't want to be the statue Venus. I want to be the birth
Venus?
of Venus. Yeah, the birth of Venus in the shell. And I want the herbs.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, we can pick anything. Everything's canon, right? Everything is real, right?
Yeah.
Medusa.
You're Medusa?
Yeah, why not?
I'm jealous. I'm Agent Cooper from Twin Peaks. I'm David Bowie in Twin Peaks, but after he became the teapot.
You want to be a teapot? Yes. Short and stout?
No. Season 3 came out, 25 years after season 2, and David Bowie was unfortunately dead. But they wanted the Philip Jeffries character, so they just he was like some kind of machine that David Lynch swears is not a teapot, but it was a fucking teapot.
I don't remember that because, I think I watched that once and I didn't really pay as much attention to it as I should. So.
Oh, I'm Dougie Jones from season 3 of Twin Peaks.
I don't know who that is, so sure, why not?
Get it, we'll love it. The people who get it will love it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know where the hell we are on the notes now. We got really carried.
I don't know. We were at the Statue of Liberty bit, so we need to talk about some things like the Cadillac. We kind of talked about, but not fully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay, but also we said there's no such thing as imagination. Everything is a memory. Everything is canon. We said that, but here's something you may not know, folks at home. Not only is Star Trek real, because it's all real, but Gene Roddenberry himself was a space brother.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if he knows that, or if they had to keep, sometimes you get reincarnated, you don't remember your past lives. Maybe when he came to Earth, they hid that from him because
maybe they wiped him.
It would be too dangerous. I don't know, but it's true. He is a space brother.
So we apparently they've also thought all science fiction is true. It wasn't just Star Trek, which Gene Roddenberry kind of built.
Right.
Star Wars.
You almost said Starship Troopers, didn't you?
No, I almost said Star Trek again.
Oh.
Apparently, Agent Scully is fucking me up more than I thought. So, but they thought Star Wars was literally true.
And how does that come up? Do you remember how that comes up?
No, I don't. Sorry, there's just too much nonsense that I just can't remember everything.
Her beautiful airbrushed Cadillac with the UFO on top, with this guy named Charles Spiegel, who everybody thinks is kind of an asshole, right?
Yep.
And she And so this is like delivered very dryly in the documentary, and I can't help but believe it had to be way more dramatic because it was Ruth
Had to
Norman.
be. Had
But
to be.
she just tells him, "I know who you are," and he's like, "Okay," and she's like, "You're Lucifer," and he's like, "Okay."
Yeah, I can kind of see it.
Right? It's like that's why nobody likes you. It's the ego thing that everyone keeps telling you is a problem. That's the Lucifer thing, and not just Lucifer, but was it Emperor Palpatine?
Yes.
He was Emperor Palpatine
From Star
in
Wars.
Star Wars, and lots of other villains too. And my favorite thing about this is she doesn't say, "You are literally Satan. Get the fuck out." You are literally Satan. That's fine. And he just like gets a new wardrobe and leans into it.
Yep.
That is him on the cover of the documentary. And that is him in the yellow outfit in the picture we saw of her with the Cadillac.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not nerdy enough to know what we're talking about, Daniel.
Yeah, that's okay.
I really
Daniel can out nerd all of us because he knows all that shit. And,
we should have went to him first to get background because these are very important historical events in this cult.
and they're
Like,
historical. They're not fiction. They're historical.
right. This is very important because Star Wars tells the story of when we went to war against the Martians.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority of Unarians, which is what I think they're called, were on the side that was against Uriel.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're doing in this life by following her is like making up for that.
Yeah, it's
She gets to be the Statue of Liberty and Queen Elizabeth I, and I believe she was Isis. Raphael was Osiris. She was Isis. And all of these really, I mean, if you watch the documentary, they go through it and it's a lot. And some of them are not even, when I say made up, I don't mean fictional. I mean whole cloth, she created these characters. But like her followers were just like grunts in the war against Uriel, except for Lucifer.
Yeah. The idea of him being like, yeah, I guess I'm Lucifer. Like, if somebody told me that, hey, you're the devil, it would depend on the scenario. But if you're in there and you're in a cult and it's like a group and they're like, yeah, you're the reason shit isn't working. Like, we're trying to call the Space Brothers and you're the reason that we don't have them here yet.
What I think
I'd be like, yeah, fuck this. I'm leaving.
what I think is really interesting is that that's the theory, but then it's like, but you can stay, like you can do better, which is just weird. It's just weird. And I think like I have like this deep level of amusement I can't get over that when he came out of the closet as the devil, everyone was like, oh yeah, it makes sense because he's a huge dick. But that's fine. He can stay.
Yeah, like we're gonna keep the guy close to us who causes all the problems, and he's just like, yeah, sure, let me hang out. This is great.
He needs an opportunity to work through his past lives and get whatever with the Space Brothers.
And Ruth Norman wore some wigs with her stuff. Nobody wore fucking worse hair pieces than this dude. Like he was bald early and just started throwing just some awful wigs and toupees on his head. Just it reminds me of, remember the episode of Seinfeld where George started trying to wear a toupee and it looked like just the worst fucking possible thing. Imagine that, but worse. Like,
but his outfits were also terrible.
Yeah,
Ruth looked amazing all the time in a very audacious and gaudy way. Don't get me wrong.
and appropriate for the time.
Yeah, but that's him in the yellow.
Look at him. That's him behind. That's Lucifer back there, and the yellow pseudo Flash fucking outfit. But look at Ruth. Ruth was also a proponent of LGBTQIA rights even back then. Look at her. What a progressive.
I mean, she was non-binary, so.
That's fair. That's fair. So she was already, kind of walking the walk back then.
God. We're an hour in, and I don't think we've actually given any facts aside from that they believe fiction is real and they had their own devil.
They had their own devil in-house. Not like, oh, that guy just like, yeah, he's over there.
Over there.
No, he's like, he's right here. We're going to hang out with him later. Maybe we'll have some fondue and a couple of drinks. And yeah, he's just going to be right there with us. Like it makes zero sense.
They definitely were fondue people. I feel like you're 100%.
Oh, yeah. It was, by the time this happened, by the way, when she takes over, it is in the 70s and 80s.
She's 75
that's fondue
years old.
time. That is fondue. That is fondue time, right?
They're eating fondue.
Yeah. So
talking about how he's Lucifer and Emperor Zod and also Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah. And just like embracing it. Like not like embracing it like, yeah. Just like, man, all right, great. And
it makes sense to me. What I think is really interesting is there's a part in the documentary where a guy is saying, you'll go to one of these crack BS psychics. He doesn't say that, but that's the implication, right? Not like the ones that Ruth and Ernest went to. And they'll tell you that you used to be Cleopatra in a past life, but that doesn't make it true. It's only true if you have a memory of being Cleopatra in a past life.
Yeah, and we didn't even get to the bit. We didn't even get to the bit where people were actually encouraged to just make up shit about their quote unquote past lives, and they're like, yeah, I remember, blah, 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 and just like storytelling the shit out of something.
Because it seems like it started with Ruth telling people, right? Because there's the two women in the documentary that Ruth informs that they used to be space cops together.
Space cops.
And they were both men at the time. And they were space cops.
They were Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's great.
It's like being a space marine, but a little bit less intense. And one of their family members did something wrong. We don't know what. It could have been
it was very vague.
Murder. We have no idea. And as a result, he, in this life, wants to let his family member go. And his partner is like, no, we're cops. We got to do the right thing. And they have this huge falling out. And now in this life, they are both women and they're like best friends. This is where I think we get into the part where this is not just fun and games. There's cult control going on. Because to me, that feels like Ruth Norman is seeing these two people who have a good relationship and are having fun or working through their past life trauma or whatever. And she goes to them and tells them, well, yeah, you're friends now. And you used to be best friends before, but something terrible happened between the two of you. And I think that's where we get into this. There is cult control happening. The people can come and go. They have real lives. They don't live like on a compound, but there's manipulation happening.
Yeah, because basically it is very eerily reminiscent of like some religions where the guilt is like what you did in the past and you need to atone for it, but they take it into past lives. Like they just make it where it's like, you were shit in this last life and this is why things aren't progressing.
The guy talks about having, when he was a kid, and to be honest with you, it sounded like run-of-the-mill growing pains, what he was describing. But he would have these intense pains in his legs, which again, lots of young people do. They're called growing pains. Anyway, he'd have these intense pains in his legs and no one could ever figure out what was wrong. Maybe he was dramatic because he did join this extremely dramatic cult. I don't know. But the reason that his legs hurt is because he was a Nazi in a past life and crashed a plane and broke his legs. And that's where the ableism comes in, is basically every bodily issue you have is a result of something bad you did in a past life.
This is where we can harken back to Nexium. where they would say everything that you have as a problem is something you have caused.
I don't know if you've ever met somebody who thinks that way, that like we cause our own health problems. I have. It's really uncomfortable, right? Like, oh, well, my ex-spouse has liver disease because she's a hateful, evil bitch. It's like, okay, but like, why do you have back pain then?
Yeah.
You know?
I have back pain. Maybe I was a weightlifter in a previous life, probably.
But I'm saying, like, you know, a lot of people, I'll say this for Unarius, a lot of people who have this sense that you caused your physical ailment do not think that they caused their physical ailment. In Unarius, it's like, oh yeah, like we all did. But I would say probably Ruth Norman did not claim that.
No.
Always been this ascended being who's so much better than everybody else.
Just this benevolent ascendant being who is just trying to make things right and trying to make things good for everybody, right?
When she walks by you, you'll be so overwhelmed by her power that it literally feels like an electric shock. She is a space goddess.
It is, but yeah, there is a lot of control in that concept of like, well, yeah, we met in a past life, and in this past life, you were a fucking asshole, and you were trying to stop the goodness of these ascendant beings coming down and giving us all this knowledge. You were the problem. So all these people are like, fuck, I need to be really good, and you know, hey. Pat Oswalt does a whole skit where like believe the most ridiculous thing you possibly can. And if it keeps you being a good person, awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you're making these people feel like shit for stuff that didn't happen.
And one of the things they point out in the podcast, which I think is really important, is it also sort of removes responsibility for the things you're doing in this life. Because they believe that all the things you're doing in this life are an expression of things that you did in a past life. Which gets really chicken and the egg, circular logic, very difficult to wrap your brain around, but somehow you are both atoning for the things you did in your past lives, but also in control of what happens in this life. And that's probably why they did these like psychodramas.
Oh yeah, that's the name for the movies they made. Over 40 of them. Over 40 of them.
They're all bad.
They're all terrible, like objectively terrible. Like we talked earlier before the show just started, where it's like these folks went into these movies and it was like in a bunch of aspiring film.
I mean, not all of them. A lot of them were, but not all of them. And I think that makes it even more interesting because you have people who maybe are taking it really seriously and people who are like, oh.
Yeah, I don't know, just play along. But they would go in and they'd have all this idea. They built these sets and all this stuff, but nothing was scripted. It was just speak your story, speak the stuff from your past, make up whatever you want.
Remember the scene where it's two people, I think it's a man and a woman, and they're like hunched down together doing something, and the guy says something and the girl's like, I don't want to do it. And so he says it again, I don't want to do it. I don't feel like doing it. And like that was the whole scene.
Yeah. And it was just like,
if you scripted it, you'd leave that out.
Yeah. And it's just the idea of like, they talked a bit on the podcast about, oh boy, this crown is like wonky. Sorry. About doing stuff like improv, and improv is like
this in a past life, Doug.
Yeah, probably. Maybe in a past life I was Biggie Smalls because he has the crown fixed like this.
Yeah, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Ooh, good one. No, I was not as good as either of those folks as far as talent. But yeah, it's like very weird because in improv, it's like there's this whole yes and. So that way you can perpetuate the thing to go. So you agree that like, so you can be like, all right, great. I'm going to say this. And you're going to agree that we're going to kind of move this. And it was just like, I think blah, 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 blah. And this other person like, nope, I'm going to go talk about it. It was just so fucked up.
If there is no such thing as imagination and everything is true, you and I are doing some past life reenactment, and it is like watching two kids that are a little bit too young to understand how gameplay works, playing make-believe, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I am Indiana Jones, and I'm going to go into the Temple of Doom. And you can be like, well, I am an alien and I'm going to abduct you. I was like, that's not a story. Like it's very
that's a story when everybody's drunk or whatever, but that's not a story that works.
right. And that is kind of, you see it in the movies too. This isn't like speculation. There is some weird stuff in these clips they show where you're like, okay, couldn't you have fixed that in editing at least? Like,
I don't think there's this way you could have fixed any of that in editing. It was so bad. And just the one thing is, like, we were talking about, so I'm going to talk a bit about the racing bit. Because there was a bit where they were both, there were some people trying to be quote unquote Native Americans, and they were doing some just super racist shit.
I think what made it even worse is that some people weren't. So it's
Yeah.
so obvious. So like some people are just speaking normally, which, let's be clear, like no fucking shit, because if that's who you were in a past life, you would be speaking in English, whatever language you spoke fluently at that time. Like they're not playing by their own rules, right? Like some people are like, obviously, I'm just going to speak normally because when I was this Native American person of whatever tribe, I don't think that they were even not racist enough to know that not all Native American people were the same. Just going to throw it out there. Controversial take. Obviously I would speak the language, so I'm just going to talk. We're going to talk. It's going to be fine. And then there's like a couple guys who are like, me go to the river to get water. Me shoot bow. And it's like, what?
Yeah. They're making it sound like they were cavemen. And, but it was just really fucking bad. And I watched this thing before you, and I said, holy fucking trigger warning, man.
Yeah, it's really bad. So I'll say this. I think the ableism upset me more because I feel like, and not to say that racism is okay, but in the world of Unarius, they do not proselytize. They don't really have any effect on anybody outside the group. And so their weird racist ideas suck, but they're not really affecting anybody because, spoiler, there's no Chinese people or Native Americans in the group. They're almost all white, if not all white. I didn't see any.
I saw one person of color in it.
Okay. So
and they were carrying out one of the signs for the planets. So
I might have been rolling my eyes when they appeared on screen.
It was just the one.
But yeah,
and forgive me, that screams, hey, we need somebody for diversity. Let's bring one person.
I'm gonna, you know what, Doug? I'm gonna say at that point in time, maybe not even, right? Like maybe it just was like that poor person just wandered in and got sucked up in this stuff. But so the racism sucks and makes their belief system suck, but it's not hurting anybody. The ableism is hurting them because they're in it and they believe this about themselves. And so that's why I thought it was a little bit more like sad. Because this is where you get to the point where no member of a cult is not a victim, with some exceptions for people who very clearly grab the coattails of the leader so they can have power. And even then it gets confusing, right? Because like maybe the reason that you're grabbing onto that power is to protect yourself. It's very complicated. But in this particular case, there's no power struggle. So these people are just there and they think like, oh, like the guy said, if you have breast cancer, it's because you got stabbed in the chest. It's like breast cancer is no joking matter. It's not a small thing. No one deserves to believe that they deserve cancer, especially not in the 70s where it's a death sentence every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was the thing is, like, there was just not a sensible way of them portraying this. Oh, this happened because this, and it was just a very kind of haphazard. Oh, well, you have this pain because this happened to you in a past life, and it didn't make any fucking sense. Like, oh, you got stabbed, so you can make a logic chain there, but it's feeble. There's not a real good logic chain there. So like sometimes when you hear guilt for stuff like that, it's more like, well, you did wrong shit and this is why you got that. this was different. This was not that. It was like you did this in a previous life and this
Well-
happened to you in a previous life. And now this is why you have this. But it wasn't like a really good logical chain.
Yeah, and that particular example didn't seem to fit in with the other examples that we heard where it was people actually being bad people.
Yep.
There's a huge difference between being a literal Nazi in World War II and like I got stabbed. So I feel like the implication, like, well, I got stabbed in battle and I was on the wrong side.
Yep.
And so that's where I think it gets really bummed. Like there's a bummer here. And, you know, the podcast points out something that I think is important is like, these are bonkers things to believe.
Mm-hmm.
None of those people showed up there because they were bonkers. They showed up there because shit was going wrong in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that you could completely submit into make-believe and everything you were going through was for a purpose. Well, geez, like that's really attractive if your life is shit.
Yeah. And I think we've seen with cults, that's kind of like how the big thing is. Oh, well, this shit's going wrong. How do I make it right? And what's the, maybe not the easiest, maybe the easiest is the wrong terminology used, but what makes a lot of sense in the concept of all this pain I'm experiencing.
Right.
And they just take people who are in pain in some sort of way or another and just, you know, the podcast points out this one bit, which this is a bit that actually, and I agree with the one guy in the podcast, shit like this infuriates me from the perspective of you're believing something that is demonstrably false. Like just like I have all this proof to show you everything you're talking about is not true. There's no way it's true at all. And they're just choosing to believe it. And in this case, it's relatively harmless, except to the people that are in it who are believing that they are causing pain to people because of shit they did in a previous life.
But also, it does seem relatively harmless to them, which is that this is talked about in the podcast, but you see it in the documentary. The sociologist is like, I don't know. I just don't know. Like they seem fine, but this is really wrong. But they seem fine. So
yeah, they're believing bullshit. But how do you tell somebody is believing bullshit that's not doing anything to harm themselves?
it isn't a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've said before, and I think you've agreed. Like whatever somebody else believes that you don't also believe is crazy to you. So like you have this
To various degrees, yes.
Yeah, like there's a spectrum of like, oh, well, this guy's a Christian and this guy's Jewish, and they believe the other person is incorrect, or they believe the other person's beliefs are kind of out there because it doesn't jive with what their deeply held belief is. And that spectrum goes from I'm a Christian, you're a Jew, to I'm a Christian and you believe that aliens are going to land and teach humans all kinds of knowledge. Like it's a very, you know, I don't know. And so I do like, I did have, I guess I'll say this. I did have a little bit of an issue with how oversimplified Armando Torres, who's the guy who was talking about this in the podcast, made it. Because on that podcast, I'm a frequent listener. On that podcast, Paige Wesley, the person who did the reporting on that episode,
yep,
she's very openly a Christian, and she doesn't hide that at all. And good for her. Every once in a while, though, you get this thing where she's talking, or the other hosts are talking about how crazy a belief is, and it's like, okay, it is also crazy to believe that a dead man came back to life, went up to heaven, and now everybody's fine. If you don't believe that, you don't think it's crazy because you believe it. I might think it's crazy because I don't believe it. And it's demonstrably false that a person could rise from the dead. But in the context of the Christian religion, it is not, because that's what makes it special. So how do you prove that the things you imagine aren't memories? And you can't, but we know that they aren't, because that's insane. But you can't prove that any more than you can prove that Christianity is false, or that Muslims are wrong, or whatever. And so I think it gets a little bit more complicated. We just have a comfort level of, the crazier something sounds to us, the more comfortable we are saying that's crazy. But the reality is, it does not matter what you believe. I include my beliefs in this as well, because I have spiritual beliefs. They're crazy. It is crazy to believe in anything supernatural, and I'm sorry, but religion is supernatural. So
You get no disagreement from me on that. But I have always been of the opinion that if you believe something and it causes nobody harm, great. I don't care.
No, I agree.
I just believe don't proselytize to me. That shit, I don't leave me out of it.
100% agreement.
So one of the things we really haven't really discussed is we talked about the library. We did not discuss how the library is going to be built. Not
Well,
really.
it's not library anymore.
Oh, that's true.
Not library because Ruth took over and everything got bigger, better, and sparklier. Or in the
Softier, yes. So yeah, we had to shift gears because I realized we hadn't really talked about this. We talked about a space library, but Ruth took that and made it into like a steroid version of that. So please explain what she thought.
Well, so first of all, you have to understand that Ruth believes that there are 33, I guess you call them nations, right? They're all different planets.
Part of the Federation. The Federation.
She has lived on all these planets, and it is implied had a leadership position on all of them. Anyway,
Of course.
So here's the thing that's weird. She believes there are 33, but she says only 32 ships are coming. I think maybe she thinks she's the 33rd.
Maybe because there's no need to have a ship if it's here.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. So they bought this property outside of El Cajon after also looking a lot. Like this is a theme in this cult is that for a while you just wander around trying to figure it out. And I love that when they were looking for the landing site, they would just randomly leave signs around that said "Welcome, Space Brothers," just in case that was the spot. But they settled on a spot. They bought the property. This is where the Space Brothers are going to come. And what is going to happen is that 32 individual spaceships are going to come down from outer space and land on top of each other. And they're going to create a 32 level university that is large enough for everyone on Earth to attend. So we're talking like mothership size spaceships, not, 5 or 6 little dudes in the crew, but big old, gigantic, bigger than a skyscraper spaceships. And they're going to land on top of each other, and it's going to look fucking amazing, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're all going to go to college for free, I think. Which is
so can we agree? So we talked about the fact that imagination is not; it's just past lives, and that everything's canon. Wouldn't it be feasible that if all of them were just phone booths toppled on top of each other, so they could all be Doctor Who, they could all be TARDISes, and everybody could fit in them?
Okay, but one of them obviously is the Enterprise because Star Trek is real.
And then we could have one of the Star Wars ships, one of the ships from Halo. Like, why not? Let's just throw it all in.
The Enterprise is really big.
Yeah, the Enterprise is big.
It's got to be a really big one because 7 billion people need to be able to attend college there.
And then we can have the ship from Wall-E. Like, why not? Let's just throw them all in there. Just fucking.
Well, obviously, Wall-E really happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I think is interesting is the first time I encountered Unarius, I think I misunderstood a little bit, and I thought that they were. So there are people who believe, like Rust Cole on True Detective, that time is a flat circle. It's all happening at once.
Mm-hmm.
So
great line, by the way.
I love.
I've said that to you many times, and it's. I always say that as a joke, but like I love that line from that show.
But so they would believe like all the space stuff happened in the future, but it also already happened because they believe it's all happening at once. Which there's actually a lot of science that would suggest that everything is happening at once, which is really, if you really want to be uncomfortable, read some of that.
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah, but that's not what they believe. They're not saying something like Star Trek happened in the future, but it's not the future because time goes like this, not like this. They're saying Star Trek happened millions of years ago. Star Wars really did take place a long time ago in a galaxy far away. Like they believe it literally already happened historically. And that is even wilder to me.
Yeah, it's the idea that something that is a fiction story is like, oh, well, that explains the wars between Mars and Earth. Oh, it does. Like, I also saw a show called The Expanse where Mars and Earth fought, and does that mean that part of it too? Is that when did that happen? Like, there's a lot of unanswerable shit for them, and
Well, and I think there's a certain level of genius, right? It's not
yeah,
that Star Wars happened like Star Wars happened in the movies. It's
mhm.
that Star Wars happened, but it was actually a war between Earthlings and Martians. So like you always have like this get out of jail free card where you can be like, no, that's about something else.
Yeah, and I want to point out the idea that on the podcast they made the point that like this cult is more like there's no end date. Although they pretend that the Space Brothers are coming, but there's not like a for real end date. Whereas like something like Heaven's Gate, which at the same time they very much had an end date, and
That's where
like
things go wrong.
yeah, and that's what and he said just and the podcast they're like just keep that shit going. And I'm like yeah, you could just fucking ride that wave, but the problem is they don't have an active recruiting bit to
No,
bring
and they've
in.
never been large. That's the other thing I don't think we covered. There's no evidence that they've ever had more than a few hundred people.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't have a few hundred people now. They showed, and I cannot remember the year the documentary came out. I think it was about 10 to 15 years ago. There's not a lot of people in these past life services that they do because they have these services where you get up and you talk about your past life to work it out, and everybody sits there and is like, "Yeah, it was there. It totally happened." There's not a lot of people in that room. One thing I kind of wanted to do in preparation for this, but I had a lot of like ethical concerns around. You can pay $10 and get a year-long membership, and you can watch the live streams. Yeah, and I feel like it would be really interesting just to see. Um, but it feels weird. Like it feels weird on a lot of levels. Like I don't want to be a member of a cult, and also I don't want to be like a voyeur. I do kind of want one of the spaceship pins that you can buy on their website. They're really fabulous, like you would expect. It's a little silver spaceship with multicolored stones in it. It's very adorable. You can also buy beautiful prints of Ruth Norman in her many outfits.
See, that would be fun. If I could get like, so I have like things like Buddy Christ. I have
Well,
Yukon Cornelius. If I could get a Ruth Norman one, that would be badass.
they need to get into Funko Pop, right?
Yeah, and I have, this is my favorite one. Good
Oh,
call.
that's great. I do have a Funko nearby. I don't have most of mine out on display, but I have Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Like I have a bunch of them, but I don't put them all out. But like I have Yukon, Cornelius, and Buddy Christ, and a little Christmas tree between.
In reaching distance, I don't have this, but I have Patrick Swayze from Dirty Dancing and the Black Lodge, Agent Cooper, and Laura Palmer. But I can't reach them from where I'm sitting. So you guys are just
Okay.
watching
But having a Ruth Norman one with one of her
that.
outfits with her regalia, the big bowling ball thing in the middle, and like all the planets, that would be awesome. I'm gonna.
Greg, can we get that particular picture where she's got like the flames around her head and the big balls all over? Can we get that on the screen again at all?
Yeah, because I would love to have that as a fucking.
Yeah, look at this. So here's
Look how awesome it is. She's like the heat. She's like the heat miser with planets.
the one on her chest is literally a bowling ball. It blows my mind. And they say on the podcast, she was sitting in a wheelchair and she had to be carted around because it weighed 44 pounds. That's dedication. And also early drag gloves that would put any drag gloves at any drag show you've been to shame.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute shame. Her fingernails glow. Come on.
Yeah. And she like after Raphael passed away, this was her thing. She just like she was fabulous. She just would look like, I'm 70 and 80 years old. Who gives a shit? I'm gonna put all this stuff on me. I'm gonna wear fucking awesome things. I'm gonna wear crowns with lights in it. I'm gonna wear shit.
Can we see
But I
the
mean,
the
yeah,
gold
just
pantsuit again?
yeah, and just like good for her. She was just like, I'm just gonna look awesome and just
A lot of there is a gold pantsuit one where she's like, I don't even know what she's standing next to. It's this one. That's casual wear for Ruth Norman.
Mhm.
That's Tuesday for her.
Is that the precursor to the stupid globe that Trump and the United Arab Emirates had him hold his hands over? Hey, it's all happening, right? It's all not imagined. It's all
not.
there.
It's all true. What is the most exciting thing that is true for you? Now that you know that everything is real, what's the most exciting one for you?
Probably that the universe is infinite. I believe that regardless of that, but like that just fascinates me. I was watching. I know that's
culture wise. What's
pop culture wise.
Yeah.
That Chris Gaines was a real guy.
Oh my god! I didn't even think about it. Wait. So is Chris Gaines a past life of Garth Brooks, or is Garth Brooks a past life of Chris Gaines?
I don't know.
Oh my god! And
how about that? How about that? I threw that shit. That came out of my brain somewhere. I don't know. I haven't thought about Chris Gaines in 20 years.
Well, I've thought about him more recently than that, which tells you a lot about me. But you're blowing my mind. Oh,
how about you? How about you? You need to give one now too. That is a dumb one. There's probably a more serious, fun one I could come up with.
I'm losing it right now because I'm like, was every parody song actually a real song before?
Is Weird Al actually a fucking complete genius? He
Oh my
is.
god! If imagination is real, my friends and I have a joke that Weird Al is God. So that means that Weird Al is God.
He might be. Accordion God.
I was gonna say the X-Files, which feels boring now.
No, the X-Files are fucking great.
Because there's this little tiny part of me that every once in a while I access that is a conspiracy theorist. Not QAnon level at all, not whatever. I don't care about who killed Kennedy. Not like that.
Yeah.
But some of like in 2016, the government released a whole bunch of UFO shit. Like they were like, this is our shit. And I'm like, well, that raises some questions. So if the X-Files is real, that validates that little part of me that's a conspiracy theorist.
What is the
Oh my god, that also means that all conspiracy theories are real.
Okay, but all right. Yeah. All right.
Moving on, it's too deep.
Yeah, all right. So no, not moving on. I'm gonna stick with the conspiracy thing. Give me a conspiracy theory that you think is actually real.
You're putting me on the spot because I gotta like. At least I think people. Okay.
Do it because we're amongst friends.
All right. Ugh. I've almost finished my Fox Mulder, so it's time to be Fox Mulder. I believe that either people really have been abducted by aliens, or whatever the government did to them was so infinitely worse that it is safer to believe they were abducted by aliens than to face the truth of what the government did to them.
Why do all of them think that there's an anal probe involved? Is that a government thing or an alien thing?
Okay, I feel the need to explain what I just said. I'm so embarrassed that I said that out loud.
Don't be, because there's not a thing about that seems like it couldn't be feasible.
So my dad.
That's the thing about conspiracy theories. They could all fucking. It sounds like as long as you can find a twinge of feasibility to it, it sounds like it can make sense.
My dad had this gift that people who would never tell another soul something that happened in their life, would tell my dad. Like there was an experience we had where we were all there and my stepmom's girlfriend went to the bathroom and she's gone for the longest time and she comes back sobbing and we're like, what happened? Because on the other side of the window, her husband, who's a Vietnam veteran, was just telling my dad like every horrible thing that happened in Vietnam and he had never spoken about it to her once. That just happened to my dad. I don't know why. But he had a buddy who claimed to be part of government experiments. And he would like die on that hill. He wasn't paranoid about anything else though. And that always bothered me. And that's where that started for me. It's like if somebody is actually a paranoid person or they have like paranoid delusions, they're not paranoid just when they talk to my dad, but live perfectly normal lives. Like this guy was a very successful businessman. He kept a clean, nice house. He wasn't like looking over his shoulder, jumpy, whatever. But he had some wild shit to say. And I'm like, well, where does that delusion come from if you're not a delusional person otherwise? And that's what scares me.
Yeah,
So
when
that's
somebody
where
sounds,
it started for me.
yeah, I think if somebody sounds very sensible and then they have this one fucking thing that just you're like, okay, well, they're so sensible at everything else.
Right. Because I've also had people in my life who, due to whatever was going on in their brain, because mental health care is not accessible, they believed a lot of crazy things, or they believed a lot of improbable or impossible things. And you're like, okay, you know, that's rough, but I care about this person, so I'll just kind of deal with it. But when it's just one thing, oh, it makes me so nervous.
Yeah. All right. So
we're getting deep tonight.
this is okay though. So I'm trying to think of one that is just like, so I tend to be a very much here's a very logical progression of things. That's how I think. That's how I work through things. I think it's absolutely asinine to think that we're the only beings that live and can travel off planet. I think that is absolutely insane to think that we're the only folks. Like, now here's the thing: like somebody like Stephen Hawking says, like we would not want to meet aliens who can travel because they are most likely a million times smarter than us.
Because they're traveling very far.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of think that's kind of right, but I also think that if there's life elsewhere, a lot of it, I'm not saying we're the smartest things. Like I look at something like octopuses. Octopuses are brilliant and really they're able to, they do a lot of things that like most life forms can't. And if you're going to talk about seeding alien life form from another planet, that is a place to start because those things don't look like they belong on it. And nothing else in the kingdom of nature looks like that or acts like them. Nothing.
We might be starting a cult right now, Doug, because I recall, and I wish I knew this was going to come up because I would have looked for my source, and I don't have a source right now. I remember reading something where they discovered that like octopus DNA is unlike anything else on Earth. I don't remember the details. It was a very long time ago, but I kind of had this moment of like everything you just said of like, I mean, octopuses are fucking weird. Like maybe they aren't from here.
Well, if you've ever heard people talk about the idea of life from another planet, they think that the cephalopod kind of model is what probably would work in a lot more environments than how we work.
Right.
And then something I also think about is the idea that like we only view life as how it's carbon based.
Yeah.
Not everything. That doesn't mean that life can't form in something else that's not carbon based. Like the idea of something living on a different planet that isn't carbon based. How is that not like? If you think that life can evolve from a single celled organism, which I do,
yeah,
how can you think that the single celled organism that's the only model, the only one, the only way that can happen?
Yeah.
Like I think that for the infiniteness of the universe, the idea that is the only way life can form seems kind of narrow-minded.
I think that a lot of beliefs around there being no life on other planets, there being no possibility of whatever, is very egotistical because there are universes like plural. Like there's so much we don't know. And it's just like, yes, but we're the best. Like that's very like,
It seemed pretty arrogant, doesn't it?
but yeah, that got weird, Doug. We got weird with it.
We got deep. We got deep.
Other than X-Files themed cocktails, because we just like we reopened the X-Files just now. It turns out Ruth Norman was correct. We do all have past lives. They can be fictional. You are actually Agent Scully. I am actually Agent Mulder.
Okay, that could go a whole lot of places because there was a million episodes of that show.
I know. I've watched it twice all the way through, and well, twice from the beginning, and have not made it all the way through because the seasons with T1000 are rough.
Yeah. All right. So, side note, we're talking about cults, but I need to ask this question. We're both X-Files aficionados. We had X-Files drinks. We're talking about UFO cults.
I have an X-Files flashlight. I wish I would have thought to bring it on today.
So give me your favorite X-Files episode.
Oh, okay. I'm perhaps unusual in that my favorites are not like, people like the Chung episode or the one with like the weird people or whatever. My favorite X-Files episode is when Mulder has a past life as a Civil War soldier. I love it when he's sad. I love sad Mulder.
You like sad Mulder?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with one, and that's for a reason because this one is so fucked up that they showed it, I think, once.
Ooh.
And maybe twice, and it was one that was called Home, and it was in season 4, and it was basically where this woman was trying to carry on her bloodline, but she had no arms or legs, so she was kept under a bed, and her children were impregnating her, and that was so profoundly fucked up.
I forgot what it was called, but of course, that's what I was talking about with the inbreeding thing, and it is like it's really fucked up, but it's good in other ways too because it's one of their like themey episodes. It's like B-movie themed. I don't dislike those episodes. Like those are everybody's favorite. My favorite is the Civil War one and the Smoking Man episode, where you find out that he's just a frustrated author.
Yes, that I remember, and he's like sitting there trying to write a book, and you're just like,
so
that's who he is,
right? And he gets his like final rejection. He's like, "Fuck it, I'm taking over the world." Like, I don't know, but yeah, and I like some of the sillier ones too. I don't know. Oh my God, Daniel, how did you forget Home? It's so upsetting. It's on.
It is wildly upsetting to watch.
It's on. Here's a
it was at a time before like Black Mirror and all that shit where you were used to being shocked. This thing was like I remember being really fucking upset after that episode.
The other one I really like is the Freak Show one.
That's a good one too.
I wish I knew we were talking about X-Files because somewhere, maybe I'll post it in the Facebook group. I have a picture of me with Enigma, the geek from that episode. He's so creepy.
That's awesome.
On purpose. Like he does it on purpose. He knows what he's doing. So a million years ago, when my husband and I were dating, we went to the very first Baltimore tattoo convention. Obviously, he's there. For anybody who doesn't know who I'm talking about, he's the guy. He's blue. He's tattooed, and he's got horns. And at tattoo conventions, he wears like a little vest and pants, and he goes around. And if you ask to take a picture with him, he will be as creepy as fucking like he is delivering an experience. And I have never in my life been so creeped out, even though I knew he was doing it on purpose. Like I remember feeling my body just like shrink when he put his arm around me. He's great.
Yeah,
he's great. I love that episode, and that was formative for me because again, I had never seen anything like that on TV before.
I also like the one that was a little bit later where they were on the Titanic. I thought that was fucking
cool. That was a cool scene.
Yeah, so that was good. So we went a little bit off topic, but you know what? That's fine. It's our show, so let's fucking do what we want.
Doug, it's real, and we need to talk.
All real. It's all real. All of it.
But that also means that all of the explanations for Mulder's sister disappearing are also all real.
Yeah.
Every life she disappears in a different way. Done. Explained it. Fine. It's not X-Files isn't confusing anymore. Thank you, Ruth Norman.
Thank you, Ruth.
So, should we talk about why the Space Brothers have not come to Earth yet?
Yes, because all right. So the thing with the Space Brothers is this was Ruth Norman's invention, right? She created the Space Brothers. That's who she said were the people that were coming down, right?
Yeah, derivatively, right? She took it from
Derivatively.
the Ascended Masters, and then she was like, "What if they were Space Brothers who wanted to build a university?"
Yeah, and then she
Your wife-
proclaimed she was kind of part of that crowd. So
Right.
all right, whatever. So she predicted that the Space Brothers are going to come in 2001. Right. So the problem is she predicted that would have made her 101 when that happened.
But also, and this is important, she was such a smart lady, because they were only going to come on one condition:
We were ready.
that we were ready, and not that Unarius was ready. That
Humanity.
we were ready.
Yeah, and we were at peace. I think.
Can you remind me what notable historical event happened in 2001, Doug?
Yeah, it was. They predicted it was they were going to come in 2001, but then in 2001 in September, something really atrocious happened.
Oh.
What was that? What was that giant event that happened that made us not ready for the Space Brothers to come?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe there was a terrorist attack in New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as they said in the podcast, apparently they're only concerned with what happens in the United States.
Right.
Not all the shit going on all over the world that's really fucked up, just the United States. So
right, because we were the only country in the world that experienced anything negative in 2011, with the exception of the countries we personally went to war with. Everyone else was fine.
Yeah, all of it. There was no strife, there was no famine, there was no
Nobody was
poverty.
starving.
Everything was great.
Yeah, it was cool. It's so unfortunate that September 11th ruined that for the entire world.
Mm.
And now we have poverty and famine and wars that the US aren't even involved in, if you can believe it.
I just don't know. Oh my goodness.
I love it. I'm going to tell you why I love it, because we got to find this, because there's a really great documentary about a doomsday cult that allows the documentarians to be there on the day that they predict the world is going to end. Spoiler alert, you might have guessed because we're here, it didn't. They didn't all die, which is cool because that would have made it a really terrible documentary. But a lot of these doomsday cults, there's the Parks and Rec doomsday cult that.
Yeah, my wife mentioned that where they're like, "Oh, it's supposed to happen this day." Well, we have an ice cream social. Well, I miscalculated. It's the day after that.
Often it's not like that. Often, the cult leader changes his mind a few times and then he feels a little backed into a corner, and then we've got, Heaven's Gate. Actually, when we cover Heaven's Gate, I've got some intense theories on why it really ended the way it did. But doomsday cults often end in mass suicide or mass murder because at the end of the day, you don't have anywhere else to go, because guess what? We're not getting raptured. It's not fucking happening. Sorry. It's not happening.
But that's the genius of this cult, is that it's like, oh, well, we're not ready. We're not ready. It's okay. We're just gonna wait until we're ready. And that's kind of like, keep it going. Except the problem is they don't have enough people, and they don't recruit, and they don't know how to have more people to keep it going. So
here's the thing, right? Cult Podcast did not follow through. They didn't have, they said they needed people to donate money for them to go take over Unarius, which is fair. I just live a couple hours away. We could change the landscape. We could go in, get the fucking Cadillac. To be honest, that's mostly what I'm interested in, is the Cadillac. But they don't need to know that. We go in and we could reboot the whole thing. We could be like, hey, guess what? Chinese people are people. I am actually Ruth Norman, and I'm telling you I was mistaken about that. And we could LARP. our heart's content.
Mm. So does that mean if you're going to be Ruth Norman, can I grow my beard
Uh-huh.
and then I could be the ghost from Paranorman?
Yes.
Because when I have my beard and I do this and I fluff it out, I look like that fucking crazy ghost.
Do it, because here's the thing: you can't be Lucifer.
No.
Because a few years ago, I told noted noir author Krista Faust about this cult, and she promised that she would be my Lucifer. If I
Okay,
ever
well, I don't have to be Lucifer. I could be just fucking Paranorman guy. I'm good with that.
and Chris is really cut out for the job. So, and Jerry has the wardrobe, like it just works. So, and I don't want you to be Raphael, because like even if in this life we don't have to be together, I just feel like that'd be awkward.
I think it should just be like I'm not Raphael. I'm Donatello, and let's just.
There you go. And somebody could finally be Da Vinci.
Oh, that would be great.
Not
Why
just
do they not use Da Vinci for that? That's an obvious one.
fighting to be the Mona Lisa. I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh, you could be the I forgot what it's called. The man, you know, the anatomical model that Da Vinci did.
Oh yeah, that was like that's also included in like when we send shit out into space and hope the aliens find it. It's like that's the whole.
Yeah, you could be that guy. You're the reincarnated.
Do I walk around like that naked? Because that will not be an attractive sight. So let's not do that.
I feel like we could also, if we're taking over, we could set rules about nudity that make everybody comfortable. There wasn't any nudity in the doc. See, this is the thing that's kind of fun about this cult. Like, the people who died of natural causes. You know, Ruth Norman would be 123 years old right now if she were alive. It's no surprise she's dead. There's no sexual assault. There's no weird ritual sex. Nobody's like drinking cum or doing anything. Like everything they're doing is weird, but not weird on a visceral level.
Yeah, not something where you feel like damage is being done, but like, yeah, they're fucking weird. And I'm sure there was copious amounts of drugs being done back in like the 70s and 80s when this shit was done. But everybody was doing drugs back then. So that's not like outrageous.
I'm telling you right now that I don't believe that any of those movies were made where absolutely no one was on LSD. I don't think they
are
all
fucking
were,
weird.
but somebody fucking was. And also, by the way, top of the line special effects for the time, though, which are cheesy as hell today. Do not get me wrong. You watch it now, you're gonna be like, oh. But at the time,
it is not great. And it's funny, like you watch something like that and it looks so bad. It's like watching, if you ever watched the first Terminator now, back then that shit was like bleeding edge fucking special effects. And you watch it now and it looks so bad.
Over Christmas, my husband always takes his yearly vacation around Christmas. So he had almost 2 weeks off all at once, which is very rare for us. And for whatever fucking reason, we decided to rewatch True Blood. The special effects in season 1 of True Blood are about the same quality as the special effects in the Unarius movies. Like, wow. Just about. I mean, it's bad. I mean, I guess they, budget issues, but what the hell was the budget of Unarius? It couldn't have been that big. She was spending money on bowling balls and Cadillacs and live doves. Like,
and having people sew lights into crowns and like whatever, but like, goodness. Yeah, I don't know. It can't have been a lot.
Yeah. I'm just saying, you don't have to go back very far to be like, ooh, special effects weren't always great.
No, and they haven't. And it's funny. I think we're a bit spoiled now. Like, I was listening to a podcast where we talked about the movie Cliffhanger, which is 30 years old with Sly Stallone.
Well, I don't like hearing that.
And it's like everything's green screen, but it's very, like, to us, this looks like fucking like the worst green screening ever. But back then, that was like, that's how people did shit. It's not like things like Mission Impossible now where Tom Cruise is doing all his fucking stunts. Back then, they didn't do that shit.
Unless you, oh God, I forgot his name. Unless you were George Miller. All the Mad Max movies are practical effects. The only CGI in Fury Road is the storm. Yeah, and same thing with The Exorcist, although I'll say with The Exorcist, it's actually really bad that it was all practical effects because the director, William Friedkin, hurt a lot of people physically to make that work. And so fuck him, but it was all practical effects.
And I will say that I saw that movie when I was pretty young, and that movie kind of made me not want to sleep with the lights off for a while. I saw that probably younger than I probably should have. Like,
we'll talk about off show because I didn't watch it till I was an adult.
Yeah, no, I watched it. I was 9 years old when I watched that.
My favorite thing, and everybody listening, like DM me or email us at thecultbarshow@gmail.com. My favorite thing is people's first time watching The Exorcist stories. I love it. Because mine was just like, wow, this is a great movie because I was grown and I had already read the book. But yeah.
Yeah, I watched that and that kind of, like I said, now I look at it, it looks ridiculous.
Well, shit. That really happened too.
Yeah. Yeah, it did, apparently.
And
I have a good one. That means the movie Jacob's Ladder happened.
Oh, is that super depressing Robin Williams one?
No, this is the one with Tim Robbins. Tim Robbins, he's in Vietnam.
Oh.
And that movie is fucking weird and fucked up. And I still don't want to watch that again. That's how fucked up that movie is.
I don't really do war movies.
It's not war. It's psychedelics. And just the psychedelics they pumped into soldiers in Vietnam and what they saw in the middle of psychedelics.
That I just realized that means Requiem for a Dream really happened.
No, thank you.
Yeah, see, it gets dark if you follow the trail far enough.
Yeah.
So Greg was booted. Our lovely producer was booted. We were talking about the episode of X-Files Home, where Greg's saying that means that really happened. It's like, it does. Sorry.
Well, how much do you think that there's this really weird shit like that actually really fucking happened? Because I think there's some really weird shit under the surface of our society that we don't really fucking see, and we don't want to believe that shit's true, but people are fucked up and weird, and some weird shit happens.
Okay. When you talk about incest with the purpose of maintaining a bloodline, that has been happening for time immemorial in royal families. And it's very interesting to me that the stereotype is that it's poor, uneducated people, when the reality is like that started with rich folks a long, long, long time ago. So
and we watch that shit in like Game of Thrones and House of Dragon, and like those things are fantasy, but that shit happens.
Happened. See, look, I thought Unarius was a fun cult, but now that I'm like thinking about that belief that everything you see on TV or in the movie theater really happened, it's starting to get dark in a hurry.
Yeah, and like watching something like Black Mirror, thinking, "Oh shit, that's all real." Well, fuck. Like it always feels like that show is very much like you feel like, "Oh, well, that could happen."
I got to tell you, I can't watch that show.
Oh, I love that show. I love that show.
The pig fucking episode.
And there's a problem. That is the very first episode of that show. That is the worst episode you should watch.
Yeah, but I gave it I gave it 2 other chances. The other one I can't remember.
Black Bear, which is
no, this one was like about an iPad, maybe, I don't know. And then the other one was the one where the guy was in Star Trek.
Yeah, Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, that was the other one.
Who looks like a dime store Matt Damon, and I thought it was Matt Damon in it at first, but yeah. There's one that I would suggest you watch. You do
a lot like Matt Damon.
Yeah, but there's an episode of that show called San Junipero that I would encourage you to watch because it's actually good. It's actually nice, and it's a happy ending.
It does have a happy ending. Okay, we'll see.
Just like Hang the DJ is another episode. There's an episode. My favorite episode of that show is this episode called "Shut Up and Dance," and it is profoundly fucked up. Like, I do not encourage, if you want to watch something and not have that sit in your brain for like 5 days, don't watch that episode.
I feel so like I'm a huge horror fan, right? I love horror movies. not like slasher movies, but like really, like I don't know. I like to be scared, but and I love horror novels. But when it comes to like I'm never gonna watch Old Boy.
Mm.
These ones that people are like, it was so fucked up and it was so gross and it was so upsetting. And I'm like, there's a point for me where like the discomfort is exciting, and then there's a point for me where it's just discomfort. And I don't want to just be uncomfortable. I want the part where it's exciting.
Whereas I like the uncomfortable bit because I feel like that makes you rethink stuff and really think through things. Like I'll give you a horror movie that recently, not recently, but within the past few years, that just completely fucking messed with my head, and it was Midsummer.
Yeah, no, see, I really enjoyed that movie. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the ones that are like where people are like, the images are the most disturbing things you will ever see in your life. And I'm like,
Okay, so something like that's sort of body horror is not your jam.
I like body horror to a point. So it's all about like where, when I think people who are like really hardcore horror fans, they want to see the most disgusting shit they can see on film.
That
And
I
I'm
don't.
happy for them that those films are made for them. But when they recommend me a movie, I'm like, probably not gonna watch it.
Yeah, like Blumhouse stuff. I don't really want to watch a lot of that stuff because a lot of it is just super gore, like in the Saw realm, which
Yeah,
some
I'm
of
not a Saw fan. I didn't like the Hostel movies.
Eli Roth is like kind of really fucked up. So yeah.
Yeah, but like, no, frick, I forgot the name of it. I don't know why I went radio edit on that either. Starry Eyes.
I
That's
haven't seen
body
that.
horror, and it's really good in my. So like, there's a lot of body horror, and it is very skin crawling, visceral body horror, but it's enjoyable for me, and it makes you think because it's like basically a girl makes a deal to become successful in Hollywood. Terrible things happen. And like The Fly, that is the most horrific body horror I can imagine on both sides, both what is happening because I've only watched the remake because I don't care about
Jeff Goldblum. Yeah.
What's happening to Jeff Goldblum is horrifying and makes you want to gag. But what is happening to the girl with the fly fetus inside of her is also just like, but I'll watch it because there's so much to that movie that goes beyond the body horror. So it just depends.
Yeah, and all that's real.
And it's all real.
All of it.
Here's the thing. I might be okay with The Fly being real if the sequels weren't real. But the sequels, she actually has the fly baby, and I hate that. I don't want that to be real.
Fair point. All right, so we're going on 2 hours here. Anything else we should wrap up with? Anything we missed?
What did we forget? I know we forgot something.
I'm sure, but I can't think of anything. I looked at the notes and everything seemed to be touched on the main points. Like I said, this is one of these cults where you're not going to feel bad because the people just believe in weird shit, and let them believe weird shit. They're not causing any harm to anybody other than themselves mentally. But it just does. Sort of does silly.
Can be blitz, and because they are ignorant to the fact that what they believe is bonkers, they seem happy. They
seem okay.
Yeah, they think that they are fixing their past wrongs, and so they're cool with it. I wouldn't want to feel that way, but that's me. Maybe if they had sucked me in the 70s, I would be like, this is great.
So we've, like I said, we talked about Sins of Our Mother, and we talked about Nexium, and we did this as sort of a palate cleanser, but we're not going to let you off easy next time.
Kidding.
Yeah, so that was fun. Renee suggested we could be really mean and dive into Heaven's Gate to kind of piggyback on the UFO thing, but we're not going to do that.
I said that.
I think this is.
Yes, Zach, that would be the idea.
Yeah, because everything's real, Zach. Everything.
We're not getting a space library anymore. We're getting a space university.
Space University.
It's open to everyone.
Open to everyone.
With a
Everybody.
2.0 or higher. I'm kidding.
Yeah. So what we are going to talk about next, excuse me, I'm going to try to pull it up because I forgot to give this to Greg as part of our
Oh,
thing.
yeah. Oops.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about, we're going to go into the wellness community, which can be really culty in a lot of ways.
Wellness community more than once on this show, just like we're going to talk about UFO cults more than once.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk about, which unfortunately is not popping up here, but we're going to talk about something by a wellness person who goes by the name of Teal Swan. I'm going to share the screen here, and Greg, you can pop it up. It's a show called The Deep End.
That's on Hulu, right?
It's on Hulu. So this is about a wellness guru named Teal Swan, who she talks a lot about different things. I've watched the whole thing. It's only 4 episodes. I don't know how many episodes you watched, Renee, of this. I think you said you watched
it. I think I'm partway through the 3rd episode, and that's when I was like, "Whew, this is a lot."
Yeah, and it's something where she's just talking about wellness and how to get better and like do all these different things, and she's an attractive white woman, so
and
she looks.
She occasionally suggests to people that suicide is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. So there's a lot to unpack in that little 4-episode show. A lot of things where she does not take to being questioned. It is. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a hard watch, but if you're not good at handling some stuff that's unsettling, then maybe don't.
This is as a teaser. She is so image conscious and so directed that when I started watching it, I was like, oh, I'm disappointed. I thought this was a documentary, not a reenactment. And then it was a documentary, not a reenactment. That's how controlling of her image, her outfits, her
hair,
events, everything. She is so just, I don't know how to explain it. It's like so tight. It doesn't look real until you start seeing the other people around her who are not that image conscious. They're probably not allowed to be. But
yeah. So I would highly suggest watching only 4 episodes. This is going to be something that we'll talk about next week. Next month, February 1st.
For Groundhog Day.
Yeah. So strap in for some wellness stuff because we haven't really delved into that yet, just because the wellness community can be a little bit off the fucking beaten path with a lot of different shit.
I don't feel like we are ever going to want to do this.
Yeah. And just
wellness to QAnon is a thing. That's a straight line for a lot of people.
Yeah, wellness to white supremacy. There's a whole if you are on TikTok at all, you can see a whole lot of videos about that shit. It's a thing. Yeah. If you want to see some interesting stuff and just listen to us blather about it, please comment. Please talk to us about it because it's going to be really fun and interesting to talk about and a little unnerving. So
yeah. I want to say thank you to people who joined us tonight because we're kind of all over the place because this one is wild. It's harmless, but it is maybe the most confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, absolutely check out the podcast because I feel like I'm really feeling what was being described in the podcast where it's like, this made me crazy. This made me lose IQ points by the end of it. I don't know what's going on anymore. It's really, the more you try to understand it, the less you understand anything.
Yeah, the more it hurts your brain. Yes.
Yeah. So this was really fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the pictures of Ruth Norman. She's a fashion icon, if not maybe a manipulative person. I mean, definitely. But yeah, and I think like we'll have to look harder to find light ones, breaks, but I'm gonna try because it's fun to have fun sometimes.
Yeah, and this is a fun podcast. It's 2 hours long. I listened to it twice because I wanted to be as prepared as I could for this, and it's just hard to be prepared for this because it's fucking like just scatterbrained.
I've listened to it 3 times total because I listened to it twice in preparation for this episode, but I listened to it once like a year ago, which is how I found out about this cult in the first place. So I cannot recommend it enough. And if you enjoyed this episode of Cult Podcast, it's likely that you're going to enjoy a lot of episodes of Cult Podcast because we're only here once a month, guys.
Yeah,
they're week.
Yeah, and they go all over. They've done like Kanye, they done like every goddamn thing you could think of.
Into their Heaven's Gate series is amazing. That was my first one of theirs, and it was so good. And they go into a lot of cults. They go into like the Moonies and all sorts of stuff. But then they'll take birdwalks, like you said, like they did Kanye West. They've done like I can't remember if it's the Norteños or the Sereños, but gangs, because they kind of they have their own definition that they use for the purposes of their show of a cult, and they will kind of go far. They'll go in unexpected places with it, but they always justify it, and it's always really interesting. You also get your run-of-the-mill cult stuff, which is done in a way that's really entertaining, but almost always respectful to victims and always well-researched.
Yeah, they do a lot of research on their stuff, whereas we kind of do. You do more research than I do. I just kind of hop along for the ride research. I am not a research person as much as you, and like my wife is like this too. Like you give her something, she will just fucking do the rabbit hole stuff, and my brain doesn't allow me to go that far. So
yeah, and they're doing something different than what we're doing, because what we're doing is like trying to open a conversation with everybody and keep really accessible sources, where they're like, we know that you are not going to spend years of your life keeping a file on this cult, so we did it for you.
We're just trying to have a lot of fun with it, or just delve into something that we find intriguing. They're like I said, they're rabbit hole people. They'll just go full on.
Also hilarious. It is a comedy podcast, believe it or not. So be prepared.
And it's very funny. The people are really good at what they do. So yeah, we highly recommend checking them out. So we got
El Cajon to take over Unarius.
So I look forward to you talking to me about when we're going to take over this cult that's 100 and something years old, that has a bunch of boomers in it, to figure out how we're going to infiltrate it.
That's part of the plan.
True. Yeah. So thanks everybody for joining us. Like Renee said, we enjoy doing this. It's fun, and thank you all for commenting. Daniel and Zach, thanks for bullshitting with us, and thanks Greg for producing this and taking care of us. And yeah, we'll see you February 1st, 9 p.m. Same bad channel. All right, thanks everybody.